everybody, welcome to the show. Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. My name is Amanda, the teacher turned homeschool mom behind Raising A to Z, this YouTube channel all about homeschooling. And today we are starting a brand new mini series, which I am so excited about. We are going to talk about the biggest fears in homeschooling. Homeschooling is a big decision, and there's a lot of things that people are worried about and they're afraid of when it comes to homeschooling. So we've asked some of our followers, and they have told us that these are their biggest fears when it comes to homeschooling, and we are going to tackle them and hopefully make them not so scary. So today we are going to do our first part of the series, and we are going to talk about the fear of socialization. Woo! So socialization is a big thing that a lot of parents worry about. It is the number one question that we get. It is the number one question that pretty much every homeschooler gets. Are you worried about socialization? Are you worried that your kid won't have friends? Are you worried that they will end up being the weird one? And for the most part, the answer, no. We don't worry about our kids being weird. We don't worry about our kids being a little eccentric. We don't worry about them being unsocialized. We are not worried about it. Socialization is not a worry, and we're going to dive into why we don't worry about socialization, and you shouldn't either. Before we start, if you guys like this video and other videos like it, please subscribe and click the bell to get notifications when we put out a new video. We have tackled this question about socialization a couple of times. We have a whole video called What About Socialization? If you have more questions or you're really worried about socialization, you might want to check that out. We'll put the link right up here for you. So questions about socialization are rampant. They are probably the number one question homeschool parents get when it comes to people asking them questions about homeschooling. How do you socialize your kids? Are you worried about socialization? Are you afraid your kid's going to turn out to be a weirdo? And I think they mean well when they ask these questions, but it gets a little irritating when you hear them all the time, especially since we're not worried about it. If you ask any person who has been homeschooling their kids for more than a year or so, they will tell you socialization is not a concern when it comes to homeschooling. It's not something that we have to worry about. And so we're going to talk a little bit about this and why you really don't need to worry about your kid being unsocialized just because they're homeschooling. So the first thing I always tell people is, if you're worried about your kid being a weirdo, going to school isn't going to fix that. There are a lot of kids in schools who are a little bit different or weird or eccentric. The fact that they go to public school or private school didn't make them like that. That's just the way they are. They have different, habits or quirks or personalities, and that's maybe not the standard, but that's what makes them them. It has nothing to do with whether they are socialized or not. Everyone is different. Sometimes those weird quirks and being a little eccentric is what is going to help them later on in life. So the fact that kids turn out a little different or a little weird doesn't mean that that has anything to do with homeschooling. That's just because that's just how they're made, and that's okay. And kind of on the same lines of like some kids are just different, we spend a lot of time trying to get our kids to all be the same and to fit in. And kids feel that need to fit in and to be just like all their other peers, especially in like a school setting. But we do this, and then when they become adults, we ask them to be different. We ask them to find ways to differentiate themselves and what makes them special and what skills do they have that others don't that make them a better job candidate. We spend their whole childhood teaching them how to fit in and be exactly like everybody else. And then when they are, we then tell them they need to be different. So when it comes to like putting that as like, well, what if my kid is not like other kids? Well, maybe that's a good thing. Like, why are we spending so much time trying to get our kids to fit in and to follow the crowd and to be, follow herd mentality in a classroom setting? And then we turn around and say, oh, now we need you to be leaders and to be different and to differentiate yourselves. And what makes you special? What makes you the better candidate? So it doesn't make sense. Why don't we just teach them to be leaders and to accept what makes them unique and different from the beginning? Why are we waiting till they're 18 to do that? So that's just something to consider. If you're like worried about socialization, maybe we should focus more on helping our kids become happy, healthy individuals who know who they really are and are able to be their best version of themselves instead of worrying about who they're sitting next to in a classroom. The other thing we need to think about is school the best place for socialization to be happening? The purpose of school comes from child labor laws. It was a place that schools were open so that kids could go there, and it kept them safe during the day while their parents were working in factories, and it also kept them out of the factories because they now had a place where they could go. So the point of school was actually more about child safety and labor laws than it was about even educating them. It was about keeping them out of the factories and making sure that the jobs went to adults who had families to support. And when you start thinking of that's why the kids have classes. It's just an easier way to group them together. It's an easier way for teachers to manage a group. It has nothing to do with like what is beneficial to them emotionally in the long term. I think it's interesting that we only ever talk about socialization really in our society when it comes to two groups of creatures: children and puppies. Hear me out. We all know that socialization for puppies and children is important, but we seem to forget what socialization means when it comes to children, and we actually use the term more correctly when we are talking about socializing puppies. So when we're talking about socialization means teaching an individual how to behave in their given society. How to behave, how to experience life, how to function in their society. When we talk about puppies, you would never just take a puppy, put them in a room, and put puppies all the exact same age as them. You wouldn't even put all the same breed as that puppy in a room and just say, there they go, they're socialized. No, you would take a puppy and you take them out into society. You take them for walks. You help them meet other dogs, other breeds, dogs of all ages, from puppies to seniors. You help them meet other species, like you introduce them to other humans who are not in your family. You introduce them to, different situations, restaurants and car rides and, plane rides, subways, conveyor belts, like all kinds of things. People who have, hats on and glasses or are in a wheelchair. That's how a dog learns how to function in society and to be well adjusted to functioning in society, right? It has nothing, you wouldn't just leave it locked in a room with dogs its own age. That doesn't make any sense. And yet that's exactly what we do with children. We put them in a classroom with kids all the same age who just happen to live all nearby, and boom, that's apparently supposed to take care of our socialization problem. That's not how it works. We tend to socialize our dogs better than we socialize our children. And I think that is an important thing to think about. There's a lot of socialization that happens in the world that parents do, and that we need to stop thinking of school as being the only place where that happens. We have a whole video on how we socialize our homeschool kids, and people are shocked when they find out all the places and things that we do with our kids. Yeah, I get that right now with COVID, things are a little tight. You can't exactly go everywhere you want to go, but that doesn't mean that you can't still socialize your kids. There are parks and there are playgrounds, there are family and friends. Those tend to be our top people that we socialize with, our cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents. There's neighbors. We take our kids on errands and on outings all the time, and they're learning through all these experiences how to behave and how to function in our society. I want you to stop worrying about socialization. Your kids are going to be okay as long as you don't lock them in their home 100% of the time. Your kids will interact with others, they will learn how to interact with others, and they will be okay. They might only make one or two friends, but those will be really close bonds compared to when you're in a classroom full of kids who, how many of those kids end up being your best friend forever, right? There's also, we need to remember that there's a lot of negative socialization that happens in schools. There's bullying and peer pressure. And when you have your kids at home and you're homeschooling them, you don't really have that nearly as much. It can occasionally happen, but it's on a much smaller scale. So don't worry, your kids are going to be okay and they will be socialized. It might still be a little weird, but aren't we all a little weird? Thank you so much for watching. Like I said at the beginning, if you really like our videos and like to follow our channel, you can subscribe and get a notification every time that we put out a new video, which is usually every Monday. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook, where we put up what we're doing on a daily basis and tips and tricks of like what we're doing in our homeschooling. And you can even sign up for our email list, where we send tips, tricks, stories, our favorite accounts, all that kind of stuff right to your inbox. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye.